Hey, what's up, good people? Welcome to another episode of FIREDUP KC. I'm your host, Zeke Wanganga, and today our topic is mass incarceration. I know you're wondering, is mass incarceration still happening in the U.S.? The question is yes, and it's still happening more and more. And today with me, I bring a legend, someone who's very educated, very informed on the matter of incarceration. I bring with me Mr. J. Austin. How you doing, sir? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you came up with this term called decarceration, right?
I don't think I came up with it, but a lot of people been saying like, hey, how is this not a more popular word? And to me, it's just the opposite of incarceration. So it doesn't seem that wild to me, but I can now understand like why this word is getting the love that it is.
But anyways, welcome to the show. Kind of give people a background about yourself, who you are, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so my name is Jay. Some people call me J-Dub, and I'm a decarcerator. So I work on different initiatives that lower the chances that people get incarcerated and decarcerate the system that we currently have. Wow,
fantastic. So how did you, where are you originally from? Well, where are you from? Are you from Kansas City?
I'm from Kansas City, Independence, Missouri.
So how did you get into decarceration? What led you into that whole journey?
So a few years ago, I was leading a video production company, and I was looking around our studio. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. We had a bunch of young creators, and so everybody was still up doing their thing, doing their thing.
Yes.
Right? Cheers, by the way.
Cheers, by the way. Yes.
And
a good wine, by the way.
Yeah, it was. Shout out to the last guest.
Shout out to Nazir for bringing the wine through.
Hey, Nazir.
You rock, my guy.
Pew pew. So, and I was looking around the studio, and I was thinking to myself, we're really good at what we do. We enjoy what we do.
Yes.
But none of these creators have lived a life like mine. And I was at a point in my career where I wanted to stop doing as many commercial gigs as we were doing.
Yes.
And start getting into deeper storytelling that could change people's minds about topics that were important, or at least topics I thought were important.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I can't put this responsibility on this set of creators to tell these deep, cutting stories.
Yes.
And so I came up with this idea to start changing the narrative by changing the storytellers. At that time, I was working with my brother named Nico.
Okay.
And Nico is a black man from KCK.
Okay.
He's an educator, and he was just getting started when it came to video production, being in front of the camera,
yes,
telling these sorts of stories. And we were working on a documentary about the East Side, and for people who don't know, like Kansas City.
East side of Kansas City, yes.
Yeah,
like
got redline.
Yeah, redlining. Yes.
And we were just asking basic questions like how come we didn't get access to things that our friends on the West Side got access to? And that was the basis of the documentary. So we were doing our research. One of the books that we were reading was called The New Jim Crow.
The New Jim Crow.
Yeah, by Michelle Alexander, and this is kind of like one of the holy books in
like
criminal justice reform.
Yes.
Yeah. Like usually, once somebody reads that, even if they're a critic of the book, they begin to see the situation differently.
Yes.
And then for people like me, it was almost like a fish learning that it was wet. You feel me? Like I was like, oh wow, this explains that, and this explains that, and da. And that was when the fire was lit.
Wow. Now, so when did this happen?
This was, man, I don't know.
Like 4 years ago?
3 years ago.
And then you kind of went into that journey, and it opened this whole perspective of what incarceration is about. Because in Kansas City, a lot of people do not know, like redlining is a big deal.
Yeah.
I came to learn about it back in 2016 when I came here, because I was living on Truce.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, I would see the difference because I went to UMKC. So I lived on the east side of Truce, and I would go over to the west side to go to school, right? And I would see the difference, but it didn't really click until I took an architecture class. It was an architecture class.
That's where you learned it?
Yeah, and I was talking about history.
Wow.
And I was talking about like how redlining goes all the way back to when they started building the east side of Kansas City was actually the booming part of Kansas City before people started fleeing. Mostly white people started fleeing because of the real estate people, like black people are moving into this neighborhood. You have to leave. Can I give people a little bit info on what redlining in Kansas City is and how it started?
Yeah, so I'm definitely not an expert on redlining,
Yes.
but here are the basics. So redlining refers literally to the color red that a lot of real estate agents would use when they were showing prospective clients where they could live. And so they'd say, okay, so over here is nice, over here is that. But anything east of this way, probably not. There's like this big red line up and down truce. And that's how Kansas City is divided. It's divided north-south. Now, other mid-major cities are divided as equally as Kansas City, although it may not be north-south, right? And those areas were almost always redlined, especially in the 40s and 50s moving forward. And these real estate developers would put things called restrictive covenants on certain neighborhoods. These were the neighborhoods that were not on the other side of the red line. But basically a restrictive covenant were the rules of the neighborhood. And they would say things like, you know, well, actually, my bad, I got that wrong. So restrictive covenants would be put into these kind of like rules of the neighborhood saying who belonged and who didn't belong
in the neighborhood,
right? And so you read these restrictive covenants from the 50s, 40s, even into the 70s sometimes, for places like Mission, Kansas, and you know, like just on the other side of the line. And it would say things like no Jews, no black people, Negroes was the term that they were using at that point. And it would just say who was restricted from the neighborhood. It was a way to protect their property values, but really it was a sign of them being scared. And that's where a lot of this stems from. When you get like really hardcore, like lock them up or keep them over there, it's really like one of the expressions of the weakest side of you, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good way to understand redlining. But the tactics, Zeke, were so wild because you had all different levels of tactics when it came to block busting, which meant like moving people out.
Kind of explain that a little bit, because I think you talked about, like on the last episode when we talked, you kind of talked about block busting, because like that really is I didn't know about it until you talked about it. It was like, it was this epiphany, like what? That really happened? It was like, that really like, so let people, get people on the know about that.
Okay, so block busting, we're not talking about movies, right? We're not talking about blockbusters.
No.
We're talking about people busting blocks, which basically meant moving white families from their neighborhoods to other neighborhoods, and then moving black folks in. And so this is at a time when the level of home ownership in America for African American folks was really, really low. There were a lot of renters at that time. And so they would be moved in to these neighborhoods that were formerly white. So this was a tactic that was used to encourage white families to move away from their neighborhoods, and then they would fill those neighborhoods with black families. Now, on the face of it, like some people could argue like that doesn't sound that bad, but here's what made it bad. In most cases, the people who were busting white blocks were moving those families out into neighborhoods where they had these restrictive covenants. And so by default, they would move into even more racist neighborhoods as a form of protection. But also, the black families who they were moving in were almost always first-time homeowners.
Wow.
And because they were first-time homeowners, and because this was the 40s and 50s, access to mortgages for black families was really, really low. Well, guess who would offer a mortgage to this family? The same
person who took people out.
And so, oh, hey, no, don't worry. Like the banks won't lend to you. We'll lend to you. Now, how did they get the white families to move? There were so many different tactics. You had like really highbrow tactics where it's like you would have community meetings and they'd speak in vague like dog whistle terms, right? And then you had like the low ball tactics. Like in Kansas City, there's a guy, I can't remember his name, I think it was like Bob Woodward, but that might be wrong. And he was so sleazy, bro. Like what he would do is he would like pick up brothers who just got out of prison. Okay, be like, hey man, I'll buy you a meal for the day, just follow my guy around. And then he'd walk into these neighborhoods, and knock on these doors, white families, and big, tough dude, right, back behind him. And the guy would say to the family like, hey, so Terrell is looking at houses in the neighborhood and he just wanted to meet some of the families here. And sometimes that's all it would take, right? That's all it would take.
Dang.
And then word was spread, right?
Exactly.
And then so that same guy who showed up would send one of his dudes back later and be like, hey, you know, the Negroes are moving in.
Wow, it's time to move. It's
Time to move. Here's an offer on your house.
Jeez.
Now, this is where it gets wild. So at that time, there were government incentives for developers to go into these neighborhoods and to fill these neighborhoods with people. One of the things that would happen was these first-time homeowners who were only getting high interest mortgage loans from the same people who busted the block.
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of times they would only meet like a low threshold financially, which qualified the company that had busted the block and moved the family in, done all that stuff. It was basically, they had like an insurance policy from the federal government in case these people defaulted on their loans.
Wow.
Defaulted on their mortgages. And a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Now, part of the program, though, was if you're the person who's leasing from you or the person who just bought the home defaults on their mortgage, the federal government will pay you everything that homeowner was supposed to pay you, but you could not do anything to the house for 3 years.
Wow.
You see how sweet of a deal that is?
Wow.
That was the financial incentive of busting blocks. But now you don't have to manage tenants. You don't have to have property management companies. The house is vacant. Now when the house is vacant, what happens to it? It becomes dilapidated.
Wow.
And so now, because the people who have moved out or the people who are already out, they're looking at this black neighborhood and they're looking at all the abandoned shit, and they say, well, black people can't take care of anything.
Wow.
But that's not the reason, right?
That's dang. Because that's a whole different perspective of things. You know, what?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
So, because what you're saying is on the front of it, people go into black neighborhoods. They're like, there's a whole bunch of like rundown houses, and what you're saying is the truth is there's people, no one is living there because no one's ever lived there. People who were living there moved out.
Yeah. That's what it was back then. That's what it was like in the 70s and 80s.
Yes.
The situation's a little bit different now, but that was the beginning of it.
Dang. Wow. Now, I'm happy you shared that because now a lot of people get that info about what really happened back then, right? Now let's fast forward and live, not too fast forward, but
I'll go wherever you take me, man.
let's go into mass incarceration. How did this start? How did this epidemic start and becoming this huge problem? And how bad is it now?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's helpful to start by trying to understand what mass incarceration really is.
Yes. Okay.
We tend to have a difficult time with big numbers, right? So, but the main way that people talk about mass incarceration is through numbers, right? At this very moment in time, if you and I could multiply ourselves and be in every unit of incarceration in this country and our territories, and if we did that, and then you and I could count in that very moment every person that's locked up, we would count something like 2 million to 2.3 million people. That's at the federal prison level, state, detention centers, jails, county, local, like every unit of incarceration,
it's
something
a huge
like
number.
That makes us in the U.S. the top incarcerator in the world.
Wow.
This is the land of the free, and we have more people locked up here than any other nation in the world, by a long shot, bro. So that's one way to think about it, but that is hard to think about.
Yes.
Like, what does it mean? Okay, so that's in the moment. Now, if we see how many people get admitted to jail and sent to prison in any given year, we're looking at something like 11 million people.
Whoa.
Now, if we expand out even further and we look at the number of people on supervised release, like parole, probation, we're looking at something like 14 to 15 million people.
Wow.
They're not in jail, they're not in prison, but they have to adhere to the rules of their parole, their probation, and violating those rules can have you incarcerated.
Exactly.
So that's one way to think about mass incarceration, is literally the numbers, but it's hard to grasp.
Yes.
Right? And it's easy to feel helpless in the face of that. So another way that you can think about mass incarceration is as the systems that work together, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that have led us to that number.
That number, yes.
For example, the way that a broken education system in areas that have been redlined and neglected and blockbusted,
Yep.
how those systems interact with policing, how those systems interact with traffic tickets, and how that interacts with the court system, and how the court system interacts with, right? So you can think of it as systems, and I love thinking in terms of systems, but systems aren't tangible. So the third way, and this is the way that I tend to try and communicate about what mass incarceration actually is mass incarceration can be seen as the hundreds of thousands, maybe the millions of choices that are made moment by moment by the people who influence the system. And so when you think about it like that, it becomes really tangible.
Yeah.
One example is like a police officer sees somebody jaywalking, walking across the street before the sign says they can go.
Okay.
What decision does that officer make in that moment? And based off of what information? What biases?
Yes.
What expectations from their boss? What expectations from the prosecutor who's going to prosecute whoever right? It's like those tiny decisions extrapolated over an immense amount of time.
13, 14 million people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, here's why this is cool though. I know we went from like 2 million, thinking about a number of 2 million, to thinking about these invisible systems, to thinking about hundreds of thousands of millions of decisions. And it seems like we've only gotten bigger in terms of scope of thinking, but really what we've done is we've gotten smaller because things that you and I do can change some of the decisions that are made moment by moment, especially at a hyper-local level.
Okay.
So, and at that point, you can really start decarceration, reform, etc.
And when you say things that we do can impact that, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so it all depends on who you are, what sort of action you want to take or inaction you want to take. If you're a voter, right?
Yes.
If this is something that you do on a daily basis. If you would like to enact police reform, your best bet in enacting police reform is to go to the ballot box and vote for the prosecutor.
Okay. Okay.
Prosecutors are elected officials in most cases. Defense attorneys are not, right? The people who defend the people who get locked up, they're not.
Yes.
But the people who prosecute them, the people who lead that office, they are.
Elected, yes.
You can have influence over your prosecutor. There are progressive prosecutors who will come out and say, and conservative prosecutors, by the way, who come out and say, yeah, we're not worried about any level of marijuana possession under this amount.
Yes.
I'm not going to prosecute that. Okay. Well, if they're not going to prosecute that, then the police will stop picking you up for it.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Kansas City, I mentioned jaywalking earlier. In the city of Kansas City, they basically came out and said, yeah, jaywalking, even though it's illegal, we're not going to give you tickets for it anymore. They're not going to prosecute that.
Yes.
Right? So that's one way you can do it, is to go and vote for your prosecutor, et cetera. Now, if you are in HR at a mid-sized company, one of the best ways you can end mass incarceration, start decarcerating, is to hire people with felony records. There are so many people who can't get through because they have a felony on their record or just have a criminal record, period, like I do. And so think about it, like, it's not just maybe immoral, unethical, whatever. It's just, you're missing out on so much talent. You're missing out on so much talent.
And it becomes a cycle, right?
It becomes a cycle.
Yes, because if you don't break, it becomes a cycle because it keeps
100%.
happening.
Yeah, 100%. Like, can we talk about recidivism just for a second?
Go ahead.
Okay, so about this cycle. When people come out of prison, most of the times they're going to be on parole.
Yes.
And the difference between probation and parole, the main difference is probation happens before incarceration, parole happens afterwards. So get out of prison, you're on parole, and you have to meet certain requirements based off of your offense that you've been convicted of, whatever the parole officers feel in that day, what jurisdiction you're in, whatever. But usually one of the conditions of your parole is that you get a job.
Okay.
Especially if you're living in like a transitional home.
Yes.
Okay? They require you to get a job. If you don't get a job in a certain amount of time, that's a parole violation. And so you could literally be sent back to prison for not having a job.
And you won't get a job because no one wants to hire you.
So that's one of the best ways, like moment to moment to moment, that somebody in an HR position or a leader of a small business can say, great, we will hire despite your records.
Wow.
Yeah, so those are the tiny ways that we
can take action and start stopping this cycle and start getting more people out of being incarcerated.
100%.
Now, let's talk about your project, Relentless, right?
Okay, cool.
Which is what you're trying to use to make sure that people who get out of prison get a job and start working immediately, right? Give us a little bit more info about what you're doing and how you're planning on being able to take action towards that direction.
Yeah, man. So the mission of Relentless is to change the stories that we are told about all the shit that perpetuates mass incarceration by changing the storytellers. And so it's a nonprofit prison diversion and reentry program that teaches premier level videography, photography, storytelling, and then for the people who know the entertainment industry or production industry, below the line skills as well. So anything from grips to lighting to audio engineers to people who style laces on shoes for Nike shoots, like that's what we're trying to do. Now from a diversion standpoint, what diversion means is this is a way to avoid being incarcerated for long periods of time. I've personally benefited from not one, not two, but 3 diversion programs.
Wow.
Yes, and so I'm a big believer in it. And you can think about that as a way to shut the front door to mass incarceration. Okay, so we want to build a diversion program where we're working probably mostly with juveniles who are really high risk or who already have found their way into the system and have been diverted to us. And if they complete our program and create the content that they need to create, then they can have their charges dropped or reduced. And that's huge. That is huge.
Yes.
Now, the reentry side is like slamming the back door to mass incarceration. So somebody's already been incarcerated, they come out, and we want them to hold a camera in their hands within the first 24 hours.
Wow.
We want them to be on set within the first 7 days. They're going to be learning not from the beginning. They're going to be learning based off of things that they want to create. They're going to try to replicate that right away. So the learning methodology is super rapid. There's going to be a rapid increase in their skills. It's going to be videography, photography, storytelling, below the line, right? And the goal of that program specifically, it's going to be longer, more intense than the diversion program, but that will be job placement, right? The goal there is to get these people into jobs as quickly as possible. And while they're in our program, we're fundraising now for it. So we have the program outline right now, but we don't have the cohorts yet. That's going to come at the end of next year.
Gotcha.
And maybe even 2023. We're taking our time. We are relentlessly patient with this so that we can get it right. But the goal is to raise enough money to where we are actually paying the guys in our reentry program. It's not free. It's not charity. This is your job.
Yes.
We did your interview while you were still locked up.
Wow.
Right? We know who you are. We know that you want it. We know that you're done with being incarcerated. Right? And this is your shot, and we're going to pay you as paid apprentices to rapidly develop your skills. And then you're going to be in a position to either own your own agency or move into a larger agency or move into bigger entertainment sets and doing their thing.
Wow.
Yeah, we want to make them self-sufficient as quickly as possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's a huge deal, and being able to be on the front of it, that's just, being able to work with someone who just came out. That's a sacrifice for you, right? So where is this happening?
No.
So
it's not a sacrifice at all.
Yeah, okay.
No, like this, I don't feel like the work I'm doing is charity. You know, these are full ass people who've lived incredible lives, and if they made it out of it, or even if they're still in it, as long as they're walking, they're some of the most resilient people you'll ever meet in your life.
Yes.
So it's not charity or a sacrifice, it's a privilege.
It's a privilege to be able to be in that forefront. Now, where is this happening? Where is this program starting at? Where are you doing this?
Yeah, so we are going to be launching in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
And there's a chance that we have a diversion program here in Kansas City.
Okay. So are you working with like companies, or are you working with any organizations to be able to have direct contact with, when people come out of prison, or how do people get to know your program and get to be, kind of information about you guys and how they can get onto it?
Yeah. So if people want to visit the site, relentless.org, okay. I'll give you the details on that. But there are 5 different ways to get involved with Relentless. It's participate, advocate, donate. There's some other ones. Partner.
Yes.
And I gotta look at our marketing materials again. But the partners are really important.
Okay.
So partners are organizations that are either helping to design the programs as co-signers, like they co-sign the program. So they're helping to develop the programs, but most importantly, they're giving these participants, we call them creators, with a capital C. Okay. It's better than calling them felons.
Yes.
And so the partners are giving creators with a capital C opportunities to go shoot. So here's one of the cool aspects of the program that we're very intentionally developing. As they develop their skills, right, they're not going to be good right away. That's fine.
Yeah, it's going to take time.
It's going to take time. But because we don't want them in a classroom setting learning like film 101, the theory of this or whatever, that's valuable in other situations. But that's not going to be what's most necessary when they first come out, because it's fucking chaotic, man. It's chaotic. And so I want to get these people shooting as quickly as possible. And in some cases, literally giving a chance for someone who shot to be someone who shoots.
Wow.
But this time as a creator with the capital C. Right? So camera in their hands in the first 24 hours, on set, on a professional set within the first 7 days, just to see it.
Yes.
And immediately start creating content that replicates content that they've seen or content that we're giving them, and say, okay, here's this camera, and here's this light, and here's the example. Try to get it.
Wow. And then what is the concept behind your t-shirt? Because that's a pretty cool t-shirt.
Yeah, so we actually have a line of merchandise that we came out with because I don't want the nonprofit to be completely reliant on grants and on donations.
Yes.
I want to have an earned revenue component to it. And make sure that the people who work there have ownership over this. Ownership is such an important concept to embrace. And so I decided to come out with a line of t-shirts to help us raise money for Relentless. We have 4 different designs. I worked with a dope designer out in Arizona named Adia Sharp, and we just toiled over these designs, this first set. And the first 1,000 t-shirts are all hand designed, hand printed, or like hand pressed. And we've made it as eco-friendly and sustainable as possible, because that's really important to us too. And like even down to the packaging that it's shipped in, it's compostable, and the labels are compostable. So like we really have thought through this.
Yes.
And it has not been easy. Like I've run into so many dumb mistakes where I'm up late at night and I'm looking at the same thing I've looked at 10 times, and then on the 11th time I'm like, how did I miss that? Why am I missing this?
The process,
But you have to, embracing that process. And so this shirt specifically is one that we internally call the shooter. And this concept is one of the most controversial to embrace. Other than people who are convicted of sex crimes, violent crimes are the ones that usually get like the no touchy, like and I believe people convicted of nonviolent offenses should be free, hired, it's unjust that they are. Like that's what some people will say, but then they'll stop at violence. To me, I want to, in our reentry program, be very intentional about embracing people convicted of violent offenses. And that's for several reasons, but this is homage to that. And then the other 3 designs, we have one that's based off of and inspired by like late 80s, early 90s Chicana culture that says, I can see what others can't. And that's talking about potential.
Okay.
We have one called The Director, and just like this badass, like beautiful design that goes all the way up the chest, and it says, I'm the director of my own damn movie.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And so, you know, they're all themed like that.
Yes.
And so they're also available on the website if you want to pick it up.
Yeah, so we will definitely link that in the description so people can go there and get the merch and learn about what you guys are doing, which is exceptional work that you guys are doing.
Thanks, man.
And now we've come towards the end of the show, but I want to ask you this.
What's up, Zeke?
So, because I know right when you're talking about people who've been incarcerated and coming out and trying to get back into the community and not getting work, I always think of some people who are hiring are afraid, like you said, people who have had those, you know, hard sentences because either they shot someone or it was a murder case or something like that. So people are afraid that if they come out, hey, they might start doing the same thing they were doing before, which I think is a fear tactic that some people use. Kind of give us, what do you think would be able to help in those instances to help people start letting their mind go of the things that they thought they knew?
So back to the employer. Taking the time to really understand what happens before crimes are committed is super important when it comes to making the case internally to your boss, your supervisor, to your other employees about why you are going to this talent pool and bringing them in. Last thing I would say to this person, if you are thinking about hiring people with felony records or any sort of criminal record, if they're on parole, you need to really think about if your job site is set up to support that person as they successfully exit parole.
Okay. There's
going to be drug tests involved in a lot of cases. They might have limitations on their travel.
Okay.
Kansas City is an interesting case because we're a city in 2 states, but a lot of times somebody who's on parole in Missouri wouldn't be able to cross state line without special permission.
Oh, wow.
So think about those things, but don't let that deter you from saying, okay, we will go through this together and figure this out. Because your people on parole are most likely going to be some of your most hardcore, ambitious workers because they don't want to get sent back.
Exactly. Yes.
So if you look at them and you're like, well, there's a risk associated with that. There's a risk associated with everybody, especially like new grads. You know that they're going to be there for 2 or 3 years, But if you get like a 45-year-old dude who comes out on parole after being down for 3.5 years and he's done going to prison, he might be your next lifetime employee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a new grad as well, so we new grads, we need jobs too.
I know. I need jobs.
But I mean, what you're saying is really is important. It's really true because people are that fear mongering needs to be able to go away to understand that there's something that lets someone there, and what you see on the news is not always true. There's a person behind the name, right? It's not just a number, just a name. But man. It's been an awesome episode, man. I learned so much because that's why I brought you here. I bring you so I can learn, get more information. Also, let other people learn while they watch the show. But thank you, Jay, for coming on the show.
Of course, man.
And also, finally, and lastly, so give the people your plug again, your website, your social media, how they can contact you if they want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so there are a couple ways that you can get involved with some of the work that we're doing.
Okay.
If you want to find a way to contribute to Relentless, there are 5 different ways you can do that. And you can find out about those on relentless.org.
Okay.
But be careful. The spelling is funny because
it's R-L.
I had to drop the first E and the last E because you know who owns relentless.com when it's spelled full?
No. Who?
Jeff Bezos. So if you go to that relentless.com, it will literally lead you to Amazon.
Oh wow! Okay. So
make sure you spell it right.
Make sure you spell it right. I'll put it bold so you guys can see it.
Yes.
Don't make any mistakes.
Yeah. So donations, we have a really modest goal right now of acquiring 10 monthly donors before the end of the year.
Okay.
So it's very modest, but it would mean a lot to us at any amount. Now, if you're interested in consuming more content about decarceration, mass incarceration, policing, and criminal justice reform, we have a media platform called decarcerator.com.
Okay.
And there are a couple podcasts on there right now that we just started producing this year called The Sentencing and The Decarcerated.
Okay.
So going and checking those podcasts out, literally anywhere where you can find podcasts, and giving it some 5 stars and some love and all that, sharing it out, that would be beautiful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for coming in to drink wine with me.
Yes.
You know, having some toast.
Yes. People don't know it's 8 o'clock in the morning.
We're just sipping some wine. But yes, we've come to the end of this Fired Up Casey episode. But it's been another intuitive, fun episode, and just being able to learn, just sit down and chat. So thank us for tuning in. You know, it's your host Zeke Wanganga, and you know what to do. Go to our website at firedupkc.com or subscribe at FiredUpKC. Do not forget and do not miss out. I'll see you guys on the next episode. But for now, stay fired up and bye-bye.